American Psycho, Wall Street, the 1980s. Cocaine, designer suits, and a man who treats violence like a business transaction. Patrick Bateman isn't your typical antagonist. He's worse. He's normal. Successful, even. Bret Easton Ellis crafted something in 1991 that still makes bookstores keep it behind the counter, and for good reason. Patrick doesn't hurt people because he hears voices or had a traumatic childhood. He does it because he's bored, because causing harm fits perfectly between his morning skincare routine and his afternoon workout. The man debates restaurant reservations with more passion than he shows discussing his crimes. He knows more about Whitney Houston's discography than he does about human empathy. Ellis forces you to live inside Patrick's head, and it's a terrifying place to be. Not because it's alien or monstrous, but because it's so disturbingly familiar. The obsession with brands, status, appearance, the casual misogyny, the competitive narcissism that turns every conversation into a power struggle. Patrick is America in the 1980s, taken to its logical extreme. Consumption as identity, success as morality, and other people as disposable accessories. The real horror? Patrick fits in perfectly. His colleagues can't tell the difference between his business presentations and his confessions because, in their world, they're basically the same thing. Violence becomes just another transaction and everyone's buying what he's selling. Blood Meridian. Picture this. The American frontier, 1850s, but stripped of every romantic lie Hollywood ever told you. No heroes on horseback, no justice riding into the sunset. Just endless brutality under a sky that doesn't give a damn. Cormac McCarthy didn't write a Western, he wrote the death certificate of American innocence. Meet Judge Holden. 7 feet tall, completely hairless, speaking Latin while leading massacres. He's not just evil, he's evil with a PhD. The judge believes war is humanity's purest expression, that violence is the only honest conversation between men. He dances around campfires after battles, collects artifacts like trophies, and philosophizes about existence while his hands are still stained. The kid, our so-called protagonist, joins Glanton's gang, a group hired to eliminate Apache warriors. But they don't stop at warriors. They target everyone: women, children, soldiers, random travelers. The desert becomes a graveyard, and McCarthy describes it with the beautiful precision of someone painting with darkness. What makes Blood Meridian truly disturbing isn't the violence. It's how poetic it all sounds. McCarthy turns brutality into literature, making you complicit in the carnage by finding beauty in horror. This isn't just a book about the Old West. It's about the birth of American violence. And it's more terrifying than any monster because every word of it feels devastatingly true. House of Leaves. Some books you read, others read you back. Mark Danielewski created something that shouldn't exist, a genuinely haunted book that infects everyone who opens it. House of Leaves isn't just horror, it's a virus disguised as literature. The story seems simple. A family moves into a house that's bigger inside than outside. A hallway appears overnight. Rooms shift when no one's looking. The basement becomes a labyrinth that descends into absolute darkness, where something waits in the maze below. But that's just the beginning. The real nightmare is how Danielewski tells it, through footnotes that spiral into madness. Academic analysis that makes no sense. A manuscript found by Johnny Truant who's losing his mind while reading it. The text becomes the house. Words disappearing into white space. Sentences that loop back on themselves. Pages of crossed-out rambling that somehow makes perfect sense. You're not just reading about people lost in a house. You're getting lost in the book itself. Chapters that consume themselves. Footnotes that lead to nowhere. Words that rearrange when you're not paying attention. Your peripheral vision starts playing tricks. Shadows seem deeper. Hallways in your own house suddenly feel wrong. The book becomes the house and you become the explorer, realizing too late that some doors were never meant to be opened. Some books were never meant to be read. The Road. After the fire, after the ash, after hope itself died, a father and son walk through what used to be America. Cormac McCarthy's The Road isn't post-apocalyptic. It's post-everything. Post-humanity, post-meaning, post-God. The world is gray. Not just the sky, on everything. Trees, buildings, people's faces. The few humans left alive have mostly abandoned civilization because there's literally nothing left to sustain it. The father carries a weapon with limited options because in this new world, there are definitely things worse than death. They're heading south toward the coast, though neither really knows why. Maybe it'll be warmer. Maybe there'll be other good guys. The father keeps telling his son they're carrying the fire, that they're different from the road agents and desperate survivors. But what does good mean when you're competing for the last scraps of food? When you're teaching your 8-year-old that trust is a luxury they can't afford? The real horror isn't the cannibals or the cold or the endless gray. It's watching love try to survive in a world that's forgotten what love means. It's a father desperately trying to teach his son how to be human when humanity itself is dying. The road doesn't lead anywhere, it just keeps going, and walking it is all that's left to do. 1984. Big Brother is watching you. Not just your actions, your thoughts, your dreams, your memories of what happened yesterday. George Orwell created the ultimate nightmare, a world where truth itself becomes whatever the government says it is, and thinking differently is literally a crime. Winston Smith works at the Ministry of Truth, where his job is rewriting history. If the party says a battle never happened, Winston erases every record. If today's enemy becomes tomorrow's ally, Winston changes every newspaper, every book, every document to match the new reality. The past becomes whatever Big Brother needs it to be, and anyone who remembers differently is guilty of thought crime. But Winston does remember. Chocolate tasting better, his mother's face, a time before the party controlled everything. These memories make him dangerous, a criminal just for thinking. When he falls in love with Julia, when he dares to believe in something beyond the party's reach, he discovers that even his rebellion was planned, monitored, allowed to happen. Room 101 isn't just punishment. It's personalized psychological destruction. Whatever you fear most, they'll use it. Not to eliminate you, but to break you completely. To make you betray everything you love until there's nothing left but obedience. The most terrifying line in the book isn't screamed, it's whispered by Winston after they've finished with him. I love Big Brother. And he genuinely means it. The Wasp Factory, Frank called him as 16, lives on a remote Scottish island, and has committed terrible acts 3 times, all against family members. And that's just the beginning of the secrets buried in Iain Banks' most disturbing novel. The Wasp Factory itself is Frank's creation, a giant clock face with 12 compartments, each containing a different method of destruction. When Frank needs guidance, he releases a wasp inside and lets fate decide which chamber it enters. The wasp's demise determines Frank's actions, turning life and death decisions into a twisted game of chance. It's Frank's oracle, his god, his excuse. But Frank isn't quite who he seems. The medication his father provides isn't what he claims. The story about Frank's childhood injury isn't true. Frank's entire identity, including his gender, has been carefully constructed through years of manipulation and lies. His father has been conducting a decades-long psychological experiment on his own child, and Frank is both the subject and the victim. Banks doesn't just give us a teenage perpetrator, he gives us someone who is systematically destroyed and rebuilt as a weapon. Every terrible act Frank commits traces back to his father's manipulation. Every twisted ritual stems from years of calculated abuse. The real question isn't whether Frank is a monster, it's whether monsters are born or made, and what happens when the person creating them is supposed to love you most. The bell jar, 19 years old, brilliant, beautiful, with the world at her feet. Esther Greenwood should be happy. Everyone tells her she should be happy, but happiness feels impossible when you're suffocating under a bell jar, breathing the same stale air while watching life happen through thick glass. Sylvia Plath's only novel reads like a slow-motion descent into darkness. Esther interns at a glamorous magazine in New York City, surrounded by opportunities most girls would dream of. But depression doesn't care about your circumstances. It creeps in quietly, stealing colors from the world until everything looks gray. Food tastes like nothing. Sleep becomes impossible. Even the simplest decisions feel overwhelming. The suffocation is gradual, then sudden. Esther loses interest in her work, then her friends, then herself. She attempts to end her pain multiple times, through various means, but each failure leaves her more trapped than before. Even in the psychiatric hospital surrounded by other broken people, the jar remains firmly in place. What makes the bell jar unbearable isn't the mental illness, it's the clarity. Esther's thoughts are logical, her observations sharp. She sees the world exactly as it is, without the merciful delusions that let most people function. The bell jar isn't insanity. It's the terrible burden of seeing life with perfect, crushing clarity. And once you're under it, the glass is impossibly thick, and no one outside can hear you screaming. We have always lived in the castle. Mariquette Blackwood lives in a big house with her sister Constance and Uncle Julian. They never leave. They never have visitors. And there's a very good reason nobody comes around anymore. 6 years ago, the rest of the Blackwood family died from poisoning at Sunday dinner. Shirley Jackson's final masterpiece is told through Mariquette's eyes, and she's completely, cheerfully unhinged. She buries silver dollars in the yard and nails books to trees to keep her family safe. She talks to her cat like he's her closest confidant. She dreams of living on the moon where no one can hurt them anymore. Her narration has the sing-song quality of a child's nursery rhyme, which makes everything infinitely more disturbing. Constance was tried for the deaths and acquitted, but the townspeople still believe she's guilty. Now the sisters live in complete isolation, surviving on Constance's preserves and Merricot's protective rituals. When their cousin Charles arrives trying to claim the family fortune, Merricot's fragile world begins to crumble. Jackson never tells us who really poisoned the family. She doesn't need to. The real horror isn't the deaths, it's what comes after. How guilt and trauma can rot a family from the inside out. How love can become indistinguishable from madness. How some people build prisons and call them home, then hand the keys to the person they love most, even if that person is completely out of their mind.
Subscribe for more interesting stuff. Tell us your experience in the comments.